I never thought the sound of my own breath could terrify me, but at 11:00 p.m., with the dashboard clock glaring and the GPS pulsing like a wound, every inhale felt like proof that I had been living inside a lie. I had driven past Elijah's office tower 3 hours earlier, dark shuttered for renovations that began at 6:00 p.m., and heard the practiced voice of the man I had loved for 40 years float through the phone warm and false. Busy, Simone. Tokyo deliverables. Don't wait up. The background noises weren't conference chatter. They were softer and more intimate, a private music I recognized and could not unhear. I am Simone Vance, 62, the sort of woman who keeps grocery lists in neat columns and birthdays in a paper calendar. For decades, I believed order kept chaos away. I also believed in my husband Elijah, who wore kindness like a tailored suit and who apparently could shed it as easily. The family GPS app I insisted on after his fender bender last winter showed his silver S-Class idling in a neighborhood we had never visited together, a pocket of Atlanta, with porches like postcards and street lamps that cast a gentle glow over perfect hedges. The blue dot slowed, stopped, and settled in front of a cobalt two-story with hydrangeas and a wooden swing. I parked 3 houses down and watched shadows drift behind lace curtains in a lit second-floor window. This was not a hotel or a bachelor crash pad. It was a home. A mailbox hand-painted with sunflowers. A welcome mat that read, "The Stanton Family." At the window, a woman in her mid-40s appeared, hair in a messy bun wrapped in a blue silk robe, so like the wine-red one Elijah gave me last anniversary. It felt like a blade slipped between ribs. She glanced toward the street with a satisfied little smile and drew the curtains closed. My phone buzzed. "Leaving the office now, love. Don't wait up. Grab dinner without me." I checked my watch. It was 11:43 p.m. The lie was bold enough to deserve applause. A boy's face 10 maybe popped into view beside the woman's for an instant. Dark waves, the way his head cocked when curious. Elijah's mannerism, but borrowed by a stranger. The nausea came first. Then the quiet, clarifying click of a mind that had finally decided it no longer wished to be fooled. I woke with a stiff neck at 5:47 a.m., the blue house still there, stubborn as truth. By the time I pulled into our driveway, Elijah was stepping through our front door with his briefcase and a box of Boston creams. He kissed my cheek and said almost cheerfully that Tokyo was a furnace, and Daryl snored like a bear. I poured coffee, nodded where a wife should nod, and waited for the shower to run. When it did, I opened his briefcase. I found the neat stack of reports the company pens, and then the thing I had never seen, a second phone tucked into a hidden compartment. Missed calls from home, a text that read, "Daddy, don't forget my soccer game Saturday. Mommy says you promised. Love you, Jalen." The name pressed a thumb into the softest part of me. In an instant, every tidy explanation I had accepted, weekend seminars, 3-day site visits, calls taken outside for better reception, began to rearrange themselves into the shape of a life that did not include me. I put everything back exactly where it had been. I learned how to do that before sunrise. I gave myself 3 days. I smiled when required, touched his arm, at the right moments even made love to the man who came home late and fell asleep with the relief of someone whose compartments were still holding. On the 4th afternoon, I dressed in a hoodie and baseball cap and drove back to the Blue House. I called his direct line first. A receptionist confirmed he was in a meeting. The neighborhood was a postcard again. At 2:30 p.m., the woman came out, Candace, as I would learn later, wearing sneakers and a practiced fatigue, a baby tucked into a front carrier. The math acquired a ruthless elegance, not only the boy in the window, but a new child months old. She walked to a cafe where hanging plants framed the doorway, and the chalkboard menu was too charming by half, and she met 2 other mothers. When one of them gushed that she was lucky her husband Marcus was so involved, Candace laughed and said that work kept him away 3 or 4 days at a time, but he always made it up to them. My husband had another name, another calendar, another life. While I pretended to check email at a back table, she scrolled her phone to show photos. There was Elijah Marcus on a Caribbean beach I knew well because he had told me he was at a corporate retreat there the same week. He carried the boy on his shoulders. Candace was pregnant, radiant, his arm wrapped easily around her. I left before my hands betrayed me. On the walk to the car, the sound of children playing rose from a small park. His voice cut clean through the afternoon. "That's it, champ. Kick harder." I froze. There he was on the field coaching, laughing wholly present, in a way that felt both familiar and foreign. I watched for 20 minutes while the part of me that used to worship him went very, very still. My phone rang. He asked if he should bring home dinner. I told him the Napa Cabernet we loved would be perfect. He said he loved me. I said the words back and tasted ash. That night, I closed the bathroom door and stared at the woman in the mirror, the one who had given up a Paris scholarship at 22, because Elijah had said the timing for children was now, and the art would wait. I thought of the sketches in our attic, the brushes I had boxed with a promise I never kept. The tears came first, a quiet leak, then a rattle I smothered in a towel. In the morning, I went upstairs and lifted the lid on the past. The paints were dry, but the girl in the sketches looked right at me as if to ask whether I was ready to stop pretending. I called a private investigator and said I wanted everything, the how, the when, the why. He asked if I was sure. I told him certainty was the only thing I had left. Agent Sterling arrived a week later with a folder that looked too slim to hold a life, and yet it did. He sat at my dining table at 10:15 a.m., the same place where birthday cakes had been sliced and school permission slips signed, and asked me once more if I wished to proceed. I nodded. The first page was a marriage certificate. Marcus Stanton had married Candace 12 years earlier on a beach lined with lanterns. He wore a white linen suit I had never seen. She held lilies I had once loved. Sterling explained how an alternate identity had been built from a scaffold of small, deliberate lies, a shell consulting firm, a second Social Security number grafted to a clerical error accounts, braided through trusts, a second driver's license issued after a lost wallet. Bigamy was the legal headline. The footnotes were worse: document forgery, tax evasion, conspiracy. The photographs that followed didn't shout. They hummed with domestic peace. Halloween costumes. A violin recital program with Jalen's name circled in red ink. A hospital bracelet for the newborn Sky, born 7 months earlier at 3:12 a.m. Tiny fingers gripping a father's thumb that belonged to my husband and to a man who didn't exist. Sterling spoke in the neutral tone of a surgeon who can only remove what disease has already taken. Candace believes she is married to a widower, he said gently. In his story, Simone died in a car accident 15 years ago. I was surprised by how little it hurt. Something colder than grief came instead. There are many kinds of murder. Erasing someone while she is still breathing is one. I asked for the money map, and Sterling obliged. Over 15 years, Elijah and Marcus had moved nearly $3 million through accounts like water, through cupped hands, tuition, travel, property taxes, a cabin in the Smokies paid in cash, a condo in Miami that explained the tan he swore he got between meetings. The crowning insult arrived wrapped in neat arithmetic. My mother's inheritance, the careful sum she left for our old age, had been siphoned in increments disguised as investment transfers. Sterling slid over the last page like a coda. There is also an offshore account in the Caymans, he said softly. The balance is approximately $5 million. The room tilted and steadied. Numbers can seem abstract until you write them in words. $5 million is not a figure. It is a decade, a museum of abandoned anniversaries, the cost of my vanished Paris. I booked a hotel room that evening and told Elijah I would visit my sister in Chicago for a long weekend. At 7:40 p.m., I sat cross-legged on a stiff bedspread with the evidence arranged like an altar, and made the decision I had been circling for days. I would not run. I would not file papers quietly and let him fold his dishonor into a fresh start. I would end his performance where he preferred to live in public, and I would protect as many innocents as I could. The first call I made was to Jamal. I did not call as a mother. I called a corporate attorney. He arrived at 8:30 p.m., jaw-tight eyes careful, and read for a full hour without speaking. When he finally looked up, the fury in him was clean and bright. "We can freeze assets on elder abuse grounds," he said, drafting in the air with one finger. "Civil injunctions, emergency motions, conservatorship triggers if necessary. Bigamy strips him of rights in equitable division. We can make this airtight." I told him I wanted accountability, not prison, but that I would let the law choose its teeth. Amara came the next morning at 9:05 a.m., a public relations strategist with a heart too soft for the world and a mind built to survive it. She wept, then wiped her face and started a list. "We control the narrative," she said. "We center your dignity, the children's innocence, the rule of law. We do not slander. We show proof. We time the story, so the legal action lands first." She opened her laptop and in minutes had a quiet machine humming anonymous tips to business reporters, a draft statement, a contact tree for when the story broke. I called Patricia, Elijah's sister, at 1:20 p.m. and told her the truth. After a long silence, she said with a sadness that felt older than both of us, "I always suspected an affair. I never imagined a second life." When I asked for access to the family safe deposit box, she didn't hesitate. "Mother trusted you more than him," she said. "If there is a key you need, I will help you find it." Inside the box, we uncovered the original will of Elijah's father, leaving assets in trust for grandchildren, with me named as administrator, revised later, apparently by magic, to make Elijah the sole heir. Patricia lifted a shaking hand to her mouth. "He forged this," she whispered. I put the paper in a protective sleeve and thought not of vengeance, but of weight. Some documents are too heavy to hold with bare fingers. Weeks became a choreography. A forensic accountant traced lines that Sterling had already drawn. The IRS tip line received a thick packet from an anonymous sender who knew exactly where to shine light. Jamal prepared orders to freeze accounts the minute we pressed go. Amara set briefing calls with editors who still believed in verification. I returned home and became for a time the greatest role I would ever play, the wife Elijah always wanted. I cooked gumbo with the roux just right. I laughed at stories I'd heard for decades. I reached for him in bed with the hunger of a woman renewed and watched the relief spread across his face. Arrogance is a solvent. It loosened his care. There were moments when the old tenderness knocked hard on the door. One evening at 6:10 p.m., he rested his head in my lap and asked if I was happy. I told him life is short and that I was choosing to value what we had. I did not add that choice is the blade that cuts both ways. On a Thursday, he mentioned retiring in a few years, traveling to Italy, to Greece, to places where light falls like mercy across stone. I said yes with a smile so smooth it felt like velvet. Inside, the plan ticked forward. The venue was his idea, the city's most glittering restaurant, a vow renewal woven into our 40th anniversary dinner. He invited 50 witnesses, partners, whose reputations lived beside his friends, whose tongues carried news-fast family, who had earned the truth. I ordered a dress the color of a cut pomegranate and practiced a smile in the mirror that said both blessing and goodbye. On the morning of the dinner, Jamal confirmed the freezes were queued. The filing staged the courier, ready to clock stamp at 9:00 p.m. Amara's team set release windows for 9:35 p.m. Exactly 5 minutes after dessert, exactly 2 minutes after the moment I suspected Elijah would raise his glass. Sterling texted at 4:02 p.m. to say the Cayman's institution had acknowledged receipt of an inquiry from federal investigators. Patricia sent a photograph of the original will with a caption that read for the grandchildren, as it should have been. I did my hair at 5:10 p.m., clasped my mother's necklace at 5:40 p.m., and stood at the mirror at 5:52 p.m., studying a face that finally looked like its owner. When Elijah took my hand outside the restaurant at 7:00 p.m., the string quartet lifted the first notes of the song we danced to as newlyweds. He whispered that I was the most beautiful woman in the room. I decided to let him be right one last time. The restaurant shimmered with gold light and false promises. 50 guests filled the hall glasses, glinting laughter floating like confetti. Elijah looked every inch the man he pretended to be. His navy suit pressed his smile, rehearsed his hand warm against the small of my back. The quartet played our song from 40 years ago, and when he leaned close to whisper that I was the most beautiful woman in the room, I smiled as if the words didn't cut. Dinner passed in courses of expensive lies oysters he ordered for me. Though he hated them champagne, he bragged about buying from the year of our wedding and toasts from friends who saw us as a fairy tale still intact. At 9:30 p.m., Elijah tapped his glass and rose, clearing his throat like a man preparing to deliver love in its purest form. Dear friends, dear family, he began, his voice rich, his timing impeccable. 40 years ago, I met a woman who made me believe in forever. Simone, my anchor, my home. Guests sighed, some dabbed at their eyes. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a blue velvet box. Tonight, in front of everyone we love, I want to renew my vows. The ring gleamed like betrayal made solid. I rose beside him, the dutiful wife to the end, and let him slip the cold diamond onto my finger. Then I turned to the crowd. 40 years is a long time, I said softly, and waited until the room quieted. Long enough to know every secret, every truth, every lie about a person, or so one would think. Elijah's smile wavered, but before he could speak, I took my phone from my purse. I've prepared something special for our anniversary. I continued, projecting warmth over ice. Because love built on honesty deserves to be celebrated with transparency. One tap, and the speakers filled with his voice, Elijah's unfiltered and damning. Candace, my love, I told Simone I have a conference all weekend. She never suspects a thing. After so many years, it's almost pathetic how easy it is. The silence that followed was breathtaking. The champagne glass slipped from his hand, shattering across the marble. I let the fragments speak for me. But there's more, I said, pressing again. The projector flared to life, wedding photos of Elijah and Candace on a sunlit beach, children's birth certificates, Christmas pictures from another home. The Stanton family. The gasps spread in waves. Faces I'd known for decades turned pale. Brenda, the wife of Elijah's partner, covered her mouth. Patricia wept. Jamal stood slowly, his voice cutting through the chaos. Don't come near my mother, he said, placing the divorce papers on the table. You're finished. Elijah's eyes darted toward me. Simone, please not here, let's talk. We've talked enough, I said. You can sign these now or face the federal charges that come with bigamy, tax fraud, and forgery. Patricia rose, trembling but firm. Elijah, we found Dad's real will, she said. You forged the one you filed. Elijah's last defense crumbled. He sank into his chair, staring at his reflection in the broken glass, and signed the papers with shaking hands. The ink smeared where his tears fell. By morning, the headlines bloomed like a storm. Prominent businessman exposed for double-life bigamy fraud, deception spanning 12 years. Every network carried his face beside mine before and after portraits of truth. Elijah's company suspended him, The IRS froze his assets, and his second wife, Candace, learned she'd married a ghost. She called me the next day, her voice trembling. "Is it true? Are you Simone Vance I am?" I told her quietly. "And I'm sorry. You were lied to, same as I was." She sobbed. "What about the children? They'll be cared for, I promised. You and I will make sure of it, because vengeance had limits. Justice did not." Within weeks, Elijah was indicted. The IRS uncovered offshore accounts totaling millions, my inheritance among them. Jamal worked relentlessly reclaiming the money in my name. Amara managed the media firestorm, ensuring my story became one of survival, not scandal. By the time Elijah faced the grand jury, he was a ghost of the man who had strutted through the gilded lyre that night. He tried to call from jail once. "Simone, please," he said. "I loved you. I made mistakes." "No," I answered. "You built empires of lies and called them love. Now live in them alone." 2 years later, I pour coffee in a sunlit condo overlooking Atlanta's skyline, my own again in every sense. My art hangs on the walls, portraits of women reclaiming themselves from silence. The critics call it bold. I call it honest. Elijah was released on good behavior, living now in a small apartment, working quietly where no one knows his name. Candace rebuilt her life. Her children are thriving, shielded from his shame. And me, I am finally free. I'm preparing for Paris at 64 to paint the sin I once only dreamed of. Life didn't end with betrayal. It began there. Sometimes we mistake endurance for love, silence for peace, forgiveness for weakness. But truth is the brush that paints freedom. And I, Simone Vance, have learned to live in color again. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what lesson you take from Simone's journey. Your thoughts mean more than you know.